Between Two Amps is proudly sponsored by Liquid Death. Right now I am enjoying a mango chainsaw.
I got some severed lime. If you don't know, they have some new flavors that have come out recently,
and they're amazing.
They're really good.
Yeah, there's a little bit of agave infused in there.
Yeah.
And so it really makes those flavors pop. I'm actually really stoked on it.
Yeah, it's really good. Murder Your Thirst, by the way. That's what I do daily.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I could possibly get through a podcast without murdering my thirst.
I agree.
I mean, really, I don't think I could riff.
Yeah.
Without murdering my thirst.
I mean,
is there anything that you can think of that you could possibly do without murdering your thirst?
No.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. I can murder my thirst. Perfect. But I definitely murder a lot of songs.
It was a perfect thirst murder.
Perfect thirst murder. Thank you. Thanks, Liquid Death. Appreciate it.
Thank you to Liquid Death.
And watch our podcast.
Yeah.
I said watch our podcast.
Yeah. Listen to our podcast.
Yeah.
Thanks, and murder your thirst.
Yep.
He was looking for a life that would give him the feeling of being worthwhile.
Welcome to another episode of Between Two Amps. We have an awesome guest today. You might know him from his current band Field Day. In the past, he's played with the likes of the Descendants. I think I've heard of them before. Dag Nasty. I mean, literally a Wikipedia of hardcore. Who's who in hardcore. Give a warm Between Two Amps welcome to Doug Carrion.
I'm looking between the two amps. I'm gonna use my Monster Energy drink. What's happening, people in podcast land?
Oh man,
what's up, guys?
Now we're getting into the ring. It's WWF.
Dude, we're gonna do a deep dive into music. We're gonna talk shop. We're gonna be deep. I'm going all the way, baby. Whatever. What's going on? Thank you guys for having me out. It's wonderful to talk about music. I love music. I've been doing it since I was a teeny bopper. Yes, it's true. I grew up in Hermosa Beach, California, the home of the mighty Black Flag. I was born in Queens, New York, the home of the mighty Ramones. I've been in a bazillion bands, and I still freakishly love what I do. And I still do it. I love it. I love writing and recording and
That's awesome.
Playing, and I've been doing it for some time, and I still just kind of keep going and still reinvent and or find interesting ways to chip away at the ice and crack the riddle. Still trying to crack the riddle like anybody else. Things that I think are interesting, but for sure, yeah. There you go. So thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks for coming on. So you grew up in Queens? Is where you started out?
I was born in Queens, and then my mom moved me to my family and I to Greenwich Village. So I lived next door to Electric Ladyland as a kid.
Oh wow!
So my babysitter was, well, I guess this is a PG kind of thing. My babysitter was a groupie for Jimi Hendrix. So like
that's awesome.
Like just fudge, as weird as it is, my mom. So I lived in Greenwich Village next to Electric Ladyland, and then my mom was a little bit worried about raising the kids in such a big city, and so she moved to this teeny sleepy beach town called Hermosa Beach. So by the time I was about 4 and almost 5, 4 and a little bit, I ended up living in Hermosa Beach, which is where I grew up, which is a beach community, kind of like outcast of Los Angeles. At the time, it was very immersed in kind of like counterculture, hippie culture, surf culture, a lot of fuck you toward the system, jazz, beatniks, weirdos, hippies, bikers. And so I kind of Surfers were still, surfing wasn't cool. That was an outcast thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I kind of grew up in that, in that kind of a wily environment. And then I guess just the way the universe worked out, I was also, maybe you could say, at the epicenter of wave 2 of punk rock. So the Descendants and Black Flag and the Circle Jerks and Red Cross and the Minutemen and all those bands were like within arm's reach of where I grew up.
So what year? So when did you first get exposed to punk? Was this like Rodney Bingenheimer, like late 70s? Like
that's kind of about it. So I'm gonna go with I was pretty aware of it when I was like 13, so you figure like I was maybe 8th grade going into 9th grade, and I was aware of like the more of the new wavy stuff, the Devos and those kinds of bands. And then I was also started to hear the murmurings of the Black Flags of the world and bands that were way on the other side of the grain. It would have been, I've said before publicly, and so you guys know, like I probably would have been more inclined to be a jazz guy. Like I grew up more like jazz is the shit. Like that was my thing. And then between
where did that come from? Was it like was your family into?
So so to go backwards, and this is a weird punk rock story, but to go backwards, like my mom was pretty advanced in her musical taste and palette, and so I got exposed to, like when I was a young kid, I would have seen the Chambers Brothers. Like my mom exposed me to everything from Jimi Hendrix to the Beatles to freaking Sly Stone, across the board.
Yeah.
Well, it just so happened that in Hermosa Beach, this teeny little 1 mile grid, there was a nightclub called The Lighthouse. And that's where Des Cadena from Black Flag, his mom and dad ran and were the booking people. So I started going there on the Sunday matinees when I was about 9, because that's when they would let the underage people in. And so my mom started taking me there for Sunday brunches. And that's where I was like, oh, wow. And really narrowed in on like piano, bass, and drums was my favorite kind of trio, like that. And so I kind of I kind of was more locked in on like the bebop world and that Chet Baker, Miles Davis thread. And I could always understand, Ornette Coleman or Coltrane, and that was in my wheelhouse. But when I started listening to Black Flag or the Minutemen, I was like, these guys are kind of jazzy, but they're punk. So it was the best, and they play fast. So it was like the best of all the worlds for me. Being a hyperactive skater surfer guy, the idea of music being angular but super fast and aggressive was like just right in my wheelhouse, and it just kind of married really well with surf skate culture, kind of like developing in the late 70s, early 80s, like fast and as air quotes radical as humanly possical.
So you mentioned that your mom had a very developed musical palette. Was there anyone in your family that was
playing musician? A musician,
So my stepdad played bass, and he was in like a cover band that would do I don't know, that kind of like 70s rock stuff, and he was super freaking talented. But the thing is that like I didn't really have any idea if that was tangible, like going backwards, like playing piano for my music teacher at school. She was the Miss Wilson. She was the first one to be like, that guy's got no talent whatsoever. So she just totally threw me under the bus. So I was always like, it always felt like music was a little bit out of reach. Like that's something other people do. until I heard Black Flag and the Ramones and Circle
Mhm.
Jerks, and I was just like, I don't know, man. That doesn't seem that far out. Like, I don't think I'm ever gonna be like, a
Yngwie?
bebop guy like
Yeah,
Russell.
yeah.
Or
That wasn't
Jocko,
really my
whatever,
that
yeah.
wasn't really my those guys really weren't my interest. Like, I would have been more like Charlie Christian or
Oh, got it.
like that Joe Pass,
Yeah.
more like guitar dudes that was more interesting to me, guys that were rippers. But I, technology, and I know we're going to drill down on technology and how it is to learn and become a player now versus back in the olden days where you had to like put the needle on the record and you're like, how's that guy play that? Like, what's he doing?
Yeah.
I
Very
think,
different.
I hope people still do that, because that ear training component of like, if I hadn't done that, like learning to play in a band and really listen what other people are doing, and learn it, like just having that as a tool rather than like, I feel like that informed or just created helped with my creativity, in that like I never really like I would get a song close enough, kind of like trying to learn it, but then that would always spawn other ideas versus like going to YouTube and having someone that has it like completely mapped out, and it's like, here's how you play it, and it's like
and following that same thread, what's fascinating is when you hear about like the old blues guys, or even Eddie Van Halen would play with his back to the crowd so people couldn't see what he was doing.
Wow.
And there was a time, as weird as it sounds, that like the way you got good at music was going out and seeing bands, and you go, how is he or she doing that? And you really tried to like look in on that. But if you go backwards, particularly in the blues world, like they were really funny about like other people watching them play.
Really?
Yeah, they're really like, dude, don't freaking take my chops or you're gonna get a thump. You know what I mean? It's like kind of funny. Where now things are a lot more. I do agree with you that training is wonderful, and being able, you just have more tools.
Right.
More
now,
tools.
They even have software like the Slow Downer or whatever, where like you could
capo
learn licks and you go,
yeah.
shit. Yeah. Well, the software analyzes the riffs and then can play it slower, but in the right key.
Wait,
just
really?
Things where you go,
I didn't know this. Oh my god.
I have one. I'm sure there's more than one, but capo is
of course
what I used, and it maps out the chord chart for you. Like, you just
Isn't it
basically
nuts?
drag and drop an MP3 in, and it's like spits it, like, here's the song.
Yeah. And now you know why you have. I mean, I do think that the caliber of players is better now. You know what I mean? Than maybe before. It's like people are playing really well, and they're rippers, and I think it's a lot. It's I'm not going to say easy, because learning an instrument is kind of like you got to put in your 10,000 hours plus.
Yeah.
It takes a long time. But there are some people that can kind of jump some of the hurdles a little bit faster.
I was just having this conversation. With somebody where it's like, you could learn math from, it's very linear, right? A, B, C. You can't jump from A to D in like mathematics or engineering, But with music, I was able to do that because I could not read music. I tried. All my music teachers were like, "Oh, what are you doing? You should not do this." Like kind of like, shushed you away. And then I was like, "Wait a second, I can do this." But at that time, I didn't have this technology, and I was like, "Who's going to show me how to play a power chord?" I didn't even know that until a band friend of mine who played in like school band knew like chord formations. He's like, "Oh, this is the power chord that's in like Black Sabbath," and I was like, "Oh my god, that's
right."
it.
and then you were just see, now it's neat that language is still shared, and that you can see the enjoyment when it's a young kid just learning a riff for the first time or clunking out like, damn, that's kind of how it sounds. And then in a way, then it becomes infinite, where it's like, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? and what's safe, like what's this, like how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? But I really do like
how far down does it go? Because I'm still digging.
It's infinite.
Yeah.
It's infinite. I don't think, in fact, I'm going to say it's 3 lifetimes worth. And no matter what you did in this lifetime, you'd have another one and another one and another one where you'd be like, as soon as you like, I know you can play guitar and you're a shredder, but it's like, as soon as you're done with that, then you're like, oh, I'm going to learn Latin music or something that's totally like, and then you fall in love with that and you get better at it. And then maybe you figure out a way to take some of those ideas and threads and move them into rock and so forth. So I think it's 3 lifetimes. I think it's 3 lifetimes worth of stuff. And whenever you get, I mean, how many times have you gotten bored and then you're like, I don't feel like playing guitar. So you change and you're like, I'm going to play piano today, or I'm going to take a different instrument, or I'm going to sing.
Yeah.
I think it's trying to harness that subconscious creativity and make something out of nothing.
Right.
Or what could be nothing. And it's just ideas that are just these electronic things whipping around in your head and in your ears. And you're like, holy shit, that's a song. And then there are people that are really good at it. They're really good at it. And so I'm just as in love with it as I've ever been. Like I still, I still love playing and learning songs and God damn, can I appreciate a well-crafted song? And you're like, oh, you bastard.
Yeah.
You hear an arrangement that makes you go like, dude, even though there are sometimes things are very formulaic, right?
Yeah.
And then every once in a blue moon, you're like, ooh, that was really clever.
Yeah.
Selfishly speaking, but on the same thread, my son is, for whatever reason, really starting to get into like hair metal.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know like what it is. And so what I keep trying to, I've never pushed an instrument on him. I've always just like, there's a bazillion guitars around the house.
Right.
If you want to pick one up, cool.
Yeah.
And as of late, he freaking loves like Def Leppard and Judas Priest, and like he's
nice.
all in. And so it's the funniest thing in the world where I find things, and bless his heart, he has the like today's generation version of it where you go, dude, have you heard Van Halen? And he's like, yeah, Jump in Panama. And you go, yeah. Go to the first record and just go a little further back. You know what I mean? So bless his heart for freaking wanting to kind of like quantize it to the nearest 2 nuggets. And you go, brother, you got to do a couple records. Get those first 3 records. And then you go, oh. And then if you like, I'm, I like Van Halen or whatever, but if you look at how influential the guitar playing is, and you're like, oh boy, that guy freaking pretty badass, like game changer. And I'm not a guitar shredder, but I can appreciate that somebody took the same instrument that Jimi Hendrix was playing and was like, oh yeah, watch this, and flipped it upside down, and you go, that's freaking badass. And I think it's cool. There are still people inventing that. So it's neat for me to see him. But what's funny is he doesn't like super aggressive, like overly aggressive vocals. So like he'd be more inclined to like Judas Priest or Bon Jovi or stuff with a lot of what you might call pop metal, where if I tried to sneak in like, what about Testament, or can you handle Slayer or whatever, he'd be like, nope, too far. I've gone too far.
Oh, you've gone too far off the okay.
So he's a lover of he loves Descendants, for example, like he loves a good pop nugget, nugget.
Yeah.
Cheap Trick is right up in his wheelhouse. He loves a freaking pop song. So kind of badass.
It's funny, like I feel like that was my trajectory, like because you know in the '80s, like that was like I came into punk early '90s, so kind of my first exposure was Headbangers Ball, so like
Right.
that was where I got to see like all the hard rock bands of the '80s, but then also like some death metal, like Morbid Angel made it on there, and Entombed. And I was like, oh, this is cool too. And then there would be Ramones videos and like Sex Pistols. I was just like, and like Danzig, like all of that. I was just like, well, this is awesome too. And it was like, but it was it wasn't until I got to punk that I also like got more into the I guess I always gravitated towards like the melodic side of metal, where there is like a pop structure but not necessarily pop vocals. So but it took a while to be like, okay, yeah, no, I love people screaming at me. And then like hardcore like of the '90s like totally fit right in.
Yeah, like for me, I didn't know because I grew up. My parents, you know, came here in the early '70s, late '60s. So I grew up with country music, like early like '70s era country music, and like '80s, which was like really popular. So like Willie Nelson, Johnny Cash, the Mandrells, you know, stuff like that. You know, Loretta Lynn and stuff like that. And then like Indian classical music. So that's all I knew.
Wow.
And then when I got into junior high school in the '80s, like I'd say like mid '80s, I got into skateboarding. So my first exposure to any music was Dead Kennedys, Minor Threat. That was immediately what I got into, and it was like, holy cow, what is this? You know, because I was never like like rock. My first like tape was like Michael Jackson's Thriller, but I wasn't into anything else. And then like all of a sudden, like I start skateboarding, and then it's like Dead Kennedys, Black Flag, so that got embedded in my DNA really early. But for me, it was through like the skate videos, like Descendants, Dag Nasty. You know, it's like I was not gonna geek out. I don't want to geek out on you, but We Got It Dankos is one of my favorite records.
Thank you. It's one of my favorite records. It's a great record. It's a great record. Stoked. It's funny. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No.
It's funny because like when I started getting into music, like okay, so there was this big jazz chapter. And then as I started getting into the punk world, punk and let's say like the distance between punk and Motley Crue at the time or whatever was so far removed that like I'm not going to say wasn't allowed, but it was just like, it was super segregated. Like if you were a punk guy, like you listen to punk, like you listen to the punk stuff. And I remember a bazillion years ago, like watching an AC/DC video of them playing live. And I thought it was like the most punk thing that I had ever seen. Or whenever I would see Kraftwerk and they would have like, they're not playing, but it was the playing. I was like, how more punk can you be than this? But there was sovereign state, you know, there were sovereign states.
It's interesting who gets the passes too, because like AC/DC, I feel like gets the punk pass. Like Motorhead gets the punk pass. Kraftwerk gets the punk pass. Like I don't know what the through line is, but like, there's definitely like the bands that get the passes.
Right. Yeah, it's funny because like even, you know, in the earlier days when there was, let's say like as Metallica was coming up, even though I was aware, like, you know how like Metallica, I guess giving the nod to the Misfits was like, what?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, that was a big deal because the Misfits were like, that was our band that we had seen. And you know, it isn't until later that you see kind of like that literally crossover between like where punk was and as punk kind of like maybe if I don't even know if you want to call it chapters, but maybe like phase one where it was a little bit closer to like art. So it was one click away from the David Bowie thing.
Oh yeah.
And so that left a lot of opportunities. And then by like wave 3 and wave 4, it had really splintered into a bunch of different things, and you could find like, how is it that Metallica is not, like there's some stuff that they do that might be in the spirit of punk rock.
Totally. I mean,
So
they were one of the bands side by side. It was early Metallica. It was something that, you skate, so you're gonna listen to this, but then you're also listening to like Ride the Lightning or like Kill 'Em All, because it was fast, it was thrashy, so it still had that element. DRI, it's like, they were a straight thrash band, but they're still kind of associated with the punk scene. It's like,
it's kind of it was kind of trippy. There was just a bit of separation. I think now you can't compare it to before, because it's just everything goes, and you see, if you look at like, you take a band like Turnstile, and it's like Turnstile, it's wonderful that what they're doing, and they're pulling the elements of, I actually like am more of a fan of, let's say, like their middle music, like the earlier stuff, didn't really, it was a little too kind of derivative of some other things, and I won't throw those guys under the bus because I think they're nice guys, but it was a little too derivative of other stuff, where once they got to like Space and Time, and where you go, oh shit, and then they're throwing the electronic thing in there, and you're like, oh shit. And it's like, that's a great, again, 6 strings, throwing in the samples, but it's not throwing in the samples the same way like Ministry did or Nine Inch Nails did, but it's really kind of it's great to see loud music kind of continue to develop and grow.
And that's what I was kind of like, everyone's like, Turnstile is mentioned as like the band right now. Like everyone's like, oh, Turnstile. And I was like, I didn't get it for a while, and I saw them play live, and I was like, oh my God, these guys are insane. Like great live show. But then I was just like, it might not be something that I'm like connecting with, but I give them props because they are taking this genre and doing their own thing with it and pushing it forward. And I was like, dude, that is awesome.
Like, they're totally a gateway band for everything else. Like any band that can do that, like, it's like a Slipknot for like heavy music. Like, I'm not like, they never really resonated with me, but I'm glad they exist because they brought so many more people in that wouldn't have been exposed to.
And I think the Turnstile guys, they write good. I mean, there was like really good songs on that record. And I was like, wow, they really like kind of came into their own, and they just did something new. And I'm like, kick ass, man. That's awesome. Because there always needs to be that band,
You see, there's some things about what they do too, which kind of like blur lines, where if you look at like, there, I like for example, here's a great blurred line. That they don't come off as tough guys.
Not at all. And it's so great.
Fucking love that, dude. I
so
fucking love that. And you go, that's badass, because their music is pretty like
aggro, I was
aggro,
like,
and then when you look at the body language of how they perform and what their characters are, what they are like, they're not really like, they don't really seem like the kind of guys that are like, let's say, the same energy that Slapshot has. The same energy that
like Madball or something like that.
Yeah. And those are great bands in their right too.
Totally.
But it's neat to see. It's kind of neat to see the guitars are still raging and roaring and noisy and all that stuff, but the energy is a lot more open, as opposed to I'm the toughest guy.
Right.
Which in a way, ... almost comes all the way back to like closer to the art world, where punk's origins, you go, wow.
Oh yeah.
Fucking wild.
There's so many different elements of that. Yeah.
And every time you see them play, you're like, oh, these guys are not just doing something they love. They're having a fucking blast doing it, which is awesome to see. It's like a lot of bands will go up, they have an agenda or whatever agenda it is, but and I'm not saying that's bad, but these guys, they just like, you're like, oh. And then when you go to their shows, there's people from all different elements. Last time I saw them, all different elements. I was like, that's fucking awesome, because it's rare that those bands existed. Back in the day, like for me, I could have said like maybe the Bad Brains. They brought different people together. Later Bad Brains, not the early stuff, but like Quickness era and like I
mean, that's the beauty of it. So good. It's, so giving the nod to Turnstile for just, kind of like putting their own stamp on it and having a good run at it and incorporating new elements maybe to it. You know what I mean? It's kind of badass. The same way, like, before we were talking about, maybe let's say like there's bands on the other end of that spectrum, like the Locusts or something like that, where it's a lot more like, whoa, I can only take small incremental bites of this. There's so much data coming at me. You know what I mean? So, and then
I'm buffering.
I know, dude. And then it's like the fact that like somebody puts on a stage show and how they would not do count offs into songs and
they just go into it. I was like, what?
I freaking love it. I love it. And I kind of know, like, I have some ideas of how they do that. But the fact that that's their trip is this like,
they're just in tune with each other.
It's like a magic trick. And I don't want to know. Like, I have an idea, but I don't want to know. I am okay plopping down my $15 and being like, dude, I love the show. Just like, I love the show.
I was like, this guy must be playing to a click. And I was like, no, they just start the songs.
They're just gnar. They're just gnar. And like, that's what's, it reminds me, again, I'm going now on a whole nother thread of like, seeing No Means No a bunch of times and how like just wonderfully tight and aggressive they were, and the drummer setting up in a weird way, and how spiky and angular it was, or seeing Propaganda where you're like, wait a minute, how's that guy singing and playing guitar like that? Like,
insane.
Is he a wizard? I think he's a wizard. So I freaking love I love the magic trick when somebody can do the magic trick and you go, damn, that's like, are you familiar with Charlie Hunter?
Yeah.
That's a magic trick. You go, dude.
Like I went and saw him up in Oakland and didn't know who he was, and some friends were just like, you should check this out. And I see, it was Charlie Hunter Trio, and I see a bass amp, I see a guitar amp, and I'm like looking around. I was like, I don't see a bass player, and I hear a bass. Where is this coming from? Like, what is happening?
And really, the idea of like rapping, now we'll go a little bit further on like when you're learning your instrument and you can do 2 or 3 different syncopations simultaneously. Like Sting, for example, has an ability of singing a great melody that's in a different tempo against a different bass part that's maybe there's counterpoints, for lack of a better word. And when you see somebody that can do that and you're like, how does their brain work like that? Like, how do they process that?
Have you seen like the live footage, like where he had started incorporating like a bass synth, like he's operating it with his feet.
Who, Sting?
And singing at the same. So it's like one rhythm with his feet, and then another rhythm on the bass, and then singing something completely unrelated to all of those things.
Now, my hypothesis is he could be part dolphin, because you know how dolphins can carry on like 9 different conversations simultaneously or whatever. So maybe in the real world, Sting is part dolphin. I don't know. We're gonna have to.
I mean, I've seen some crazy tricks. Like Sting does this, but remember that band Muse? So when I first saw them, they played, this was like maybe 15 years ago, they played a small club in Chicago called the Metro. I'm sure you played there. And I saw their guitar tech taking they had just like racks of pedals. Right? At that time, using like a fractal, all that stuff wasn't around. So he's literally fucking pedals at the edges of the songs, a different guy. So the guitar player's just playing and the tech is changing all the effects. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay.
That's pretty advanced. I mean, that's a pretty advanced approach to that. There's it's almost like, I've seen like sometimes when people have like techs that are like, making, U2 or Metallica would have Rise Against, bands like that, where it's like there's not pedals up on the stage anymore. They're just rocking and doing their thing. And then you see things like the Cult coming full circle back to the like, nope, I just want a simple pedal board on the floor. And you go, okay, so I'm a fan of all of it, the whole thing. But
whatever works for you,
yeah. But for sure, like the ones that are the wizards gives me goosebumps. Like, I love the wizards when they do that kind of stuff and keep you on your toes, wondering how do they do that?
Right. So at what point did you actually decide, like, all right, I'm going to give bass a try? Like, were there basses around the house, or was it even bass? Like, what was your first instrument? Like, I know you mentioned your stepdad had.
So stepdad was, by the time I started playing music, stepdad was long gone, and I had been given an acoustic guitar by my English teacher. And she gave me this acoustic guitar and was like, here, maybe you can do something with this. And I was kind of able to like plunk out a Ramones song and blah, 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 pretty fast. Okay. Now, in the same neighborhood where I lived, like a half a block from my house was like a school called Robinson, where all the like hooligans would hang out and skateboard and smoke weed. And one of the guys had a rec room in his grandparents' house that had equipment. So that's where I started playing with Fletcher from Pennywise. So we would do it, think kind of like the Little Rascals, where everybody kind of like got a turn trying different things. And then you learned, well, like, oh, like maybe you should be the drummer, and but Hank always wanted to play drums, and it was his house, so he had priority. So you go, okay, and then so it was
totally.
It was a lot like that, like
whichever kid can afford the drum set is the drummer.
do you remember like I never went to camp because I grew up at the beach, but maybe you have heard of a thing where they have a thing called Universal Sports, and what it is it's like a camp day where they let kids, okay, here's what soccer is like, and they try soccer for a little bit. Here's what football's like, and they try football. Here's what basketball's like, and blah, 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 blah. And they try, maybe 12 different sports over the arc of a day. And then the kids kind of get to choose what they think is cool. They go, dude, I like basketball, but and that's what I, like for me, music was a bit like that, where I was open to trying a bunch of different things, and I had access to a drum set. Poor drum set. I had access to acoustic guitars, not great ones. And I kind of got, at one point I was playing drums for a little bit, and I wouldn't say that I'm a good drummer at all, but the guy in the band loved the fact that I was a small guy and he was a small guy. And he's like, dude, I want you to come up and play bass. We'll look really good. So he was kind of like, so I kind of got, which is one of the reasons I was a Circle Jerk alumni, because I meet the height criteria. Like those guys are all like small guys, like 5'7" and 5'6" and stuff, with the exception of Xander. And so that's kind of like how it happened, where somebody was like, dude, can you play this? And I was like, yeah, I could kind of figure it out. And then that started me playing more and more bass. Continuing on, I was okay at guitar and okay at bass, and I could do either. But in my neighborhood, there was always somebody that wanted to do drums. So, okay, there was always that guy. There was always somebody that wanted to play guitar. Okay, there was that guy. But the bass spot seemed to always be empty. And I was like, I could kind of figure it out. And that's how it happened. And later, that's kind of how my role in the Descendants came about, was they were minus a bass player. And Bill had remembered that I played bass because I played in all these weird fucking shitty punk bands and stuff. And he's like, I'm going to go to Hall Doug. And that's kind of how that happened. But Fletcher from Pennywise and I did have what you'd call Southern California hardcore band called Con 800, when I was maybe like 17. So I was still in high school, 16. That was very Minor Threat SOA. And
oh, nice.
For a guy that's like, again, I wouldn't claim to be singer guy or a burly guy. For whatever reason, I can sing. I have like a pretty good like hardcore vocal that's like two octaves lower, and people are like, "Was that all that coming out of that guy?" You go, "Yeah." So, and that was kind of like, in fact, it would have been Fletcher that would have been, like, when we were doing the Little Rascals and everybody was trying. The singer of the band might have gone on a bathroom break or outside to go drink beer or whatever, and I was like, "Fletcher, can I try one?" And he's like, "Yeah." And so I grabbed one and started jumping in on a song, and he's just like, "Dude, you have a great punk voice." So for punk, I can kind of do that. Interestingly enough, Field Day just did a show with Pennywise like in the December. And for whatever reason, Jim didn't show up, but I would be the guy that would like, "Okay, Fletcher, let's run a Minor Threat song." And like, I just, we're still friends, and just, there you go. Like, I guess I'm the, like, the in what do they call it in baseball, where you're in the wings, you're in the pinch or whatever. I'm the pinch. I'm the pinch hitter. I'm the pinch vocalist. I'm so bad at like sports and stuff. Like, I don't know. I couldn't even tell you.
You didn't go to Universal Sports Day?
I didn't. But I was probably drinking coffee and talking to the parents because they're wondering like, "Who is this guy?" So like that. I did go to Universal Sports Day, only it wasn't me. But but yeah, so that's kind of how that started. Was somebody had just asked me if I could try it.
Yeah.
And I was willing to do it, and then I just stuck with it. I was really comfortable with it.
So did you end up buying a bass, or was it just kind of whatever was around?
I did when I first started playing. I was playing a Gibson SG bass that was a loaner, which was really badass. And then from there, I bought a P bass, and then from there, I tried a PV bass, which was okay for me. I kind of liked how bright it was, and then I tried a Rickenbacker, and so I tried a couple different things, and then I got another P bass, and then like when you're several times in my arc of playing music, I've had all of my gear stolen, where like you're like,
oh,
that kind of stuff, and you're like, fuck, and you got to start back over, so but that's really kind of it. So the first official one would have been a loaner Gibson SG bass.
That's rad.
That is a cool bass. I only know one person who's played that before. I've seen that. Yeah.
And like how Mike Watt has moved to 3/4 scale basses, and so it's a lot like what Mike played, kind of like after he got rid of his telly bass, and he played that. Well, I think he called it the flipper or whatever, like whatever he calls his bass.
Sure.
That one, it's like this. It's with the big like 70s humbuckers, like that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's kind of like the EBO bass, like with the mega, like, I don't know what I guess it's a humbucker or a triple coil. Like, it's huge.
Right. When you start playing, the lights are dimming in the house, that kind of thing. So I'm not really like, speaking of like gear and stuff, I'm not super snooty about it. Like, I'm a very practical kind of guy, and I think before we even talked about this, we were talking about like doing shows and having gear stolen and stuff like that. So I'm a big believer of the fruit closest to the ground, and if you can make whatever work for you, that's the best instrument. Doesn't really there's some, like, you could give a modest guitar player a $5,000 guitar. It's not really going to change much. If they're,
I mean,
it's
your
like,
wallet's going to be a lot lighter.
So currently, I guess I'll like, as of late, I've been playing Fender Mustangs, totally stock. And what's wonderful about them is they're ripping light. Because of I have the ones with the PJ series, so it has just like that. But I'm always thank you to Ernie Ball for endorsement. So I have a deal with Ernie Ball. And so I'm always flipping out the strings. And I like a lot of kind of like fret growl for field day, which lends itself to when you're playing with distorted guitars, it's okay for the bass to have a little bite to it. You know, so kind of like that. And what's great about the stock Fender Mustang basses is that they're super light. I play white ones because I love Dee Dee Ramone. And if God forbid one of them ever vanished, I have another backup one that would get FedExed to out to me on the road, or I could just go to Guitar Center and just grab that one.
That one,
I wouldn't bitch and moan too much. I'd be like, okay, we're going to make it happen. So I'm not really like I've never had a ton of money to buy expensive gear, nor have I ever thought that was like the end all, with the exception of, it's nice to have a nice acoustic guitar. Like
interesting. That is really
interesting. You know, when those ones, because it's the only thing going, like that one is, I'm a little bit more sensitive to that. Yeah. Where when it comes to bass, I can kind of make anything work. You know, acoustic guitars, I kind of like something that has a little bit more sustain, and it's really like a
body.
I'm sure like both of you guys have your quirks on instruments and stuff, and what you like and what works. I can hold a guitar or a bass and I can tell you whether I would want to play it or not. I don't even need to look at it. Like you could line up the necks like baseball bats, and I could just go but that one, but that one. And so there's something about like the shape of it. Maybe it's because I kind of am resonated and I can feel the energy of it. It's also the reason why I like to play with my headstock forward, because it's pointing forward, you know, like a staff. Like
just in case anyone runs up and tries to steal your bass off of you, you go,
that, which I've done, or it reminds me of which direction to go. You know, so it's more like that. Like there's like I want to always be projecting my energy forward as opposed to looking backwards all the time. So there's a little bit of a method to that, you know, to like loving certain instruments, you know.
I totally get what you're saying, because I was talking about this the other day, and like that muscle memory, it's like I know exactly what I want the guitar to feel like in my hand, and that usually grabs a certain guitar that I've been playing for years. And when I try to deviate, I can play it, but what's comfortable if I'm like going to play live and all the stuff that I've been rehearsing are all like muscle memory, I need that guitar to really kind of make it click.
Yeah, it's I guess in a way, the instrument is an extension of you, and it's almost like putting on shoes that are too tight. And you're like, it's cool. Like I could wear them. I guess I could run the mountain, whatever. I could dance the Macarena or whatever. But what I'd really like is, and it's a fit. And even though it's this external thing, you are connected to that.
Oh yeah.
And you're speaking through that. And I think that for whatever reason, the more comfortable you are with that, it's almost like extension, whatever that extension is. It helps you not be hyper focused on my shoes are too tight, but just to focus on the expression.
Right.
Yeah, no, for sure. That comfort level is crucial.
Yeah, it's funny, like over the years, like because early band days, like definitely lusted after as a guitar player, lusted after Gibsons, and like that was the thing that I was just like that. And then over time, and you know, just like from touring a lot, having gear stolen, like all of that, now there's kind of two paths. There's like there's a couple guitars that I definitely I couldn't imagine parting with that are, you know, weren't expensive at the time, but are worth more than I could ever replace for at this point. And it would just, you know, be soul crushing if they were stolen. And then there's like the reality of live shows, and like there's a lot of like I find myself gravitating more towards guitars that that are the right tool for the job, but don't necessarily, they're not breaking the bank. They're not gonna I'm not gonna lose my soul and cry endlessly if they disappear. But like it's like, cause I play through Fender, like Jackson and Charvel, and they're great guitars. The imports are great, and it's like a $500 to $1,000 guitar versus a $5,000+ guitar. I still am able to do the thing that the tool enables you to do and get that feeling. And I don't feel like it's a hindrance like it might have been like in the 90s when like imports were kind of so in quality and stuff like that.
I mean, they've gotten really, when you talk about like reissued guitars, the Fender and a lot of the companies have gotten really good at sometimes the newer versions sound and or are sturdier and more reliable. So when you talk about the two paths, like path one is, if you're carrying your own guitar and you're going to the studio or whatever, and that's what you're doing, that chances are that, of there being a problem are pretty reduced.
Right.
If you're getting on an airplane or you're whatever, bouncing around in the back of a van or whatever, the chances of fuckery happening are very high, really high.
Yeah.
So right off the rip, you have to decide, like, these are my favorite guitars.
Right.
But these are going to be the work guitars.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes, especially for live musicians, and everybody, everybody has that where it's like there's, Angus has got guitars that like, those are the ones that don't leave the house. Everybody's got that. And I think that and that's Angus, that's freaking that guy.
Right.
Like when you go all the way down the pecking order and you're playing at like, some, Scooby's Punk Club in freaking Sheboygan, you go, you better pay attention. Because there's so many different, like, currently Shay travels with 2 guitars. So, and even for that, one of them, he's been using, a Telly. I think it's the Jim Root Telly that he's like modified, and Shay is a freaking shredder guitar player, ripper. But he also has a couple Fender Strat backups, and we swap them out, and he'll usually travel with 2. Sorry, long story long, but on the same subject. And we try to, even though originally when we first started doing shows, we were using SGs, but the SG, for whatever reason, the Gibson was just too temperamental, and it was was so angry. Yeah, it was so hot. Who would have thunk it? It was so temperamental where it was like, whether it was coming off of a plane or going into it from hot to cold outside, or vice versa. And we just, and I kept I kept going back to Shay. I'm like, dude, I love the way the SG sounds, but that freaking Strat you have is bulletproof. Like we could toss it off of a building. And so, for our, in our world, we travel with, we can only travel with a few guitars, and those have to be super sturdy. Like they have, and the number can't be like crazy north. Like, anything once you start going above $1,000 on a guitar,
no. And it's funny, like we've talked about this on the show before, and I think Niraj and both of us, like over time, have gone Gibson more to Fender, like for a lot of the reasons that you just said. Like they're indestructible, like they're not expensive, like you can throw them anywhere, and like.
But they sound like. I play Telecasters, and I have a old 90s like American Telly, and then I just got a dual humbucker, the deluxe Telecaster. And like last night we were rehearsing, and our singer was just like, dude, that guitar sounds awesome, you know. And my Les Paul has been broken 3 times headstock on the studio that I have by the airlines.
I know, and that's the I guess that's the phobia of traveling with two, you know, nerding out on gear a little bit further. One of the things I travel with is a Sans amp, one of like those Sans amp boxes.
You gotta have those.
And I like it just because between the Fender, a new pack of strings, how I play, and that the Sans amp, I'm 90% of the way there. Like I can almost make almost anything work. And I've gotten like, dude, we've got some like 1970s Fender custom amp. And you're like, Jesus Christ, how am I going to make that thing work? So I've had to make, you know, when you do fly dates, you have to make, you got it. It's like, there's no crying.
Crapshoot.
You go, that's the amp. Now, there are certain times where we are like Shay and I, we're allowed high gain amp. So for us, our first choice is dual rectifiers, one on each side. Woohoo!
Yeah.
You know, give us the amp egg. You know, we're a loud rock band. And every once in a while, a promoter will not really know kind of like what we're getting at, and I'll have to tell him like, dude, we are not the Cramps. You cannot bring a Fender Twin here. We're not going to be able, like, I love that that's where you are. Like, I love a Princeton. Who doesn't love that shit? Yeah. But for what I do, that ain't going to work. Which segues into also talking about like amps and cabinets and not cabinets and stuff like that. Right. Like, because before we were talking about that, and I will voice my opinion. I'm drawing first blood on this one. We were recently in Pittsburgh doing a fly date, and one of the guys had one of those teeny quilter heads.
Yeah.
And it totally worked, but it was a little thin for me, a little thin. And then we were doing another fly date, and we were up in Albany, and the guy had one of those orange heads, but he had the solid state one. Kind of thin for me. So
which one was it? The Tiny Terror, like the lunchbox one?
No,
those are tube though.
It wasn't the tube. It wasn't the lunchbox one.
Oh, okay.
It was the next, like it looked like a regular orange head,
okay.
but it was the solid state.
Oh yeah.
And the thing is it's like being a guy that's connected to the ground. I kind of want to feel the vibration of my feet when the amp is going. And sometimes when you don't have cabs on stage, it's going to be a problem.
That is a problem.
You know, that's a huge problem. Yeah. Or when I haven't been able to get the right amount of low end resonation inside the room with those solid state heads. And Shay and I are like, if there was a way where we could pack it like this and it was like, oh, dude, we got the box, woohoo, we'd do it. But we're also like, that throws you into the like, okay, then you're relying on in-ears, and then you're relying on monitors, and it's like, talk about the rabbit hole. But we're Shay and I believe that the technology, and you talk about amp modeling and all that, it's getting closer. It's getting closer to like where we would be like, you know what, that's maybe the smartest play.
Yeah.
But as it stands right now, rectifiers seem to work. Even for us, like using the old JCM 800s and throwing a tube screamer in front of it for a little bit more bite, like
that's a classic setup.
Yeah. So we're still over that way, but we nerding out a little bit further, like you take, let's say, like Bad Religion. And Bad Religion, Brian has some of those plexi heads, and they're wonderful. And there are times he's got that's not what's happening.
What's happening
is the Kemper behind it. And you go, and I can understand how you get there. Like I can understand that because you go into a place and let's start with this. You go into a place and you're not getting the right sound out of your cabs, whether it's noisy, whether it's whatever. It's just not working.
Yeah.
And you're like, we're better off going with a known factor than troubleshooting this one, trying to wild card this one.
Yeah.
Then I went to see Rise. Sorry, I'm going off on a tear. I went to see Rise Against a while ago, and those guys, no cabinets.
Oh, they're playing no cabs. I grew up with those dudes, so they're like close friends of mine. And I was
what was wild was Joe had a bass cabinet way off in monitor land, like stage left, but way like so they were miking a cabinet. And it was way the frick off. Like they play big places, so it's it was far off the stage, way off there. And then Zach had like rack heads, you know, but there were really no cabs. There was no cabs, and so when you're watching them from behind the drums, you're like, dude, it's like freaking just watching the drummer.
That's
it's like a bass and drum. But then when you go out in front of the mains, you're like, dude, this band sounds awesome. So it's so, who Jimmy Eat World also just did the thing where they
they're all fractals.
Yeah, because they wanted to throw more money into lights.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, because you only have so much space when you're towing in the bus or whatever, blah 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 blah. And they opted to we're gonna lose the cabs, go to the fractals, and then we're just gonna rely on our in-ears and just focus on lights as the thing.
So like the no cabs thing, because I've seen it in large venues, because the last time I saw Jimmy Eat World was at the Greek, and 100 feet out from the stage, awesome. Going into it's I think we brought this up on another show. I went and saw Cradle of Filth at the Belasco in Los Angeles, and they were no cabs. And in a venue like that, where you're I was within 10 feet of the stage, they had given the kind of the church cage for the drummer, all plexiglass and everything. And so it tempered it a little bit, and you could sort of hear the bleed from the wedge monitors of whatever their mix were, but for the most part they were in-ears, so there's really no stage volume. So you get this weird partition of here's where the sound pressure should be coming from, but it's actually up here out of the mains, and it's going that way behind me. So it's in certain spots it sounded amazing, but in a venue that size, it's just dude, I just want loud amps in my face.
Yeah, it's funny because I know some venues, bigger venues that can afford it, they'll have spot mains kind of off the stage, but pointing almost like if you were to flip a monitor, a stage monitor the other way. And so when you're, let's say in front of the drums, 10 feet out, 5 feet out, you're getting blasted by this little, think like a monitor. And so you can kind of feel it, but it is the what came first, the chicken or the egg? It's definitely like that. Everybody's chasing how to. It just becomes. It's really complicated too, because when you have to do throw and goes where you just have 6 minutes to load in and go, and it's where you are in the order of the show. If it's man, that's super complicated. And I think that when you're playing, let's just say 400 cap rooms and below, you gotta have cabs, or you just lose people.
Yeah.
Once you start getting above that, you're 1,000 people and up, the Belascos of the world. You can kind of fake it with the mains, House of Blues. You can fake it with the mains, but it's tricky. I guess, sometimes for me, it's just weird because I really expect the full, it's almost I just expect the full frequency coming off the stage. So it's strange. It's strange to me.
And I think it's like just like with like new. It depends on. I mean, I told this story the other day, and with the other podcast is one of my friends. He's friends with the bass tech of Adam Clayton from U2.
Uh-huh.
So U2 did that 360 tour with that huge stage, and he's like, "Hey guys, if you guys want to show up to the show early, I'll give you guys a tour of the whole stage and whatever."
Yes.
And I was like, and so we got to see how everything was working. And so they basically have a full SSL underneath the stage, right?
Yes.
But the Edge still has 2 amp stage that aren't dummy cabs.
Right.
Like he's like, yeah, those are actually pumping out, sound, because again, sometimes you just need that. But I'm like, you guys are playing a fucking stadium,
Right. It's a big leap, jumping off. It's a big leap. There's a there was a band, I can't remember what the name of it is. It's slipping my mind right now. But it's kind of like they're a bit like Beartooth or one of that kind of like super.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not that band though, but they're like a modern metal kind of like hard rock metal band. And they actually have a very, very sophisticated rig, which is everything's running through in-ears and splitters. And then from there, it goes out to the board. So they everything's controlled from the stage. And they are using like 212 Mesa 212 cabs on top of like rolling rack amps or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And what's neat is that they don't put the drums in the ears, because obviously you're 5 feet away from the drummer, you can hear him. But their rig is like, they can like roll. It's very modular. Like they can roll on and be ready to go in like 6 minutes or something like that. Like they literally just roll their shit on. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, for them, is everything is it becomes a series of road cases that you have to carry, because you're doing sophisticated kind of like in-ear mixing. It's a trip.
It's so fun. Like, 'cause I was thinking about this too. It's just like over the years, like writing new records or like through the creative process, I'm also like tabulating. All right, if I'm flying to a gig, like, do I need that extra pedal? Do I need a
course
on this? Do I need a delay?
Of course.
I
know.
How can I get this idea across with a tube screamer and and a guitar?
You want to take it with 2 pedals. I want a 2 pedal option. Even now with like, there's a lot of the pedal game as a whole, like that's a whole. I don't have the patience. I can appreciate it, but I don't have the patience to be able to tap dance like that. But I like that when people do, and I pay attention to that and see how people are doing. Like we were talking before about Billy Duffy going from a sophisticated rig all the way back down to just like a simple, maybe a total of less than 10 pedals or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's always it's always neat to see people kind of come back to gear, to try different thit's see how it works for them. I'm always fascinated with that. But I hear you with the like, sometimes it's a little nerve-wracking, or even when you look at people that are doing like loop pedals and shit.
Yeah,
that's a whole nother amazing game.
That shit scares me. Like, I'm like, what if like I sneeze and I hit the button at the wrong time?
Stuff can go wrong real quick.
So many things can go wrong with that.
So many things can go wrong with that. But I can appreciate the ones that do it. Sometimes it doesn't hold my attention very long. It's like, it's pretty cool, the layered thing, and I like how it goes. But I'm good for maybe like about 6 songs, and then I'm like, okay, I kind of get it. Where I need to be able to see more of what I need to see more of the show, But I don't know. That's how people are doing shows and how they're playing and how they're bringing that stuff from the studio to, I was speaking with a friend of mine earlier today, and we were talking about how it's acceptable now to go on stage and it's just you on a laptop and you have a guitar. And it's like, a long time ago, that would have been like, wow, that would never happen. Sound guys wouldn't have understood what to do. And, now you can really you can do quite a bit. And I think a lot of that has to do with like hip hop, kind of like, and dance music, that acceptance of that, or the fusion between dance music. You take, let's say, like Nine Inch Nails, where they're an electronic band, but they're also adding live elements to it, or Ministry.
Yeah.
You go, oh, okay, they're making an even bigger sound. Kind of cool, kind of cool to see where that is. And then you also you can really appreciate when it's just a band doing it and there's no tricks, and they're just they just get up there and go.
Yeah.
And then you're also like, oh shit, Motley Crue's flying in vocals, and you go,
I'm looking forward to hearing some of the live clips from this upcoming run.
Well, we're just gonna have to see. I hope that I just hope that people love those songs, and I hope he gives it a good go and tries to just 100% give it a good go. You know what I mean? The last few times I've seen some, as you have seen, some pretty dismal clips.
Yeah.
You go, ooh. But you never know. And sometimes, I don't know whether it's how this is talking about the business part where the machine just keeps going.
Right.
And there aren't people for example, not throwing anybody under the bus, I was watching a clip of John Bon Jovi doing one of those six string Steel Horse I Ride, or whatever the song is. And his vocal, he has to sing that thing 2 octaves lower. So it's super, they've had to do key changes. But thing is it's he is nowhere close to hitting the notes. And then you go, is it a hearing thing? Is it a vocal thing? Is he just phoning it in? And then the other thing is it's dude, maybe you should take a year off to try to figure out how to do it. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying I'm not trying to be a dick about it. I'm just being try to isolate what the deal is, or accepting I got older and my voice changed and I can't hit those high notes anymore. Like Mariah Carey, where she has it, they're flying it all in, so.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I think a Mariah's song came on the other day. I was just I wonder if she's still that octave range is insane.
Yeah, those bird chirps are hard. That's hard. Did I lose one of you guys?
We might have.
My internet's going a little hazy.
A little wacky.
That's okay.
Yeah.
We're pausing. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for us to take a break. We want to thank our sponsor, Liquid Death. We want to thank our sponsors, Ernie Ball. We'd like to also thank Fender Mustang Basses.
Yeah.
And for those of you who live in Los Angeles, California, why don't you come out and see us next week? We're playing with Fear at Alex's Bar. We're also going to be out in Pomona at Characters playing with...
Characters is great.
Yes. Playing with Overexposure and the Runts. So if you live in Southern California, we're going to be doing that. I know some of you guys might be in the Midwest and you're wondering, when's Doug coming out to the Midwest? When's Doug and that Field Day Machine coming out? And you know what? We're going to be there in mid-November. That's right. We're going to be in Milwaukee on the 10th of November. We're going to be in Green Bay on the 11th of November. And lo and behold, we're going to be at the Cobra Lounge on the 12th.
The old Cobra.
Cobra Lounge in Chicago.
Up to
this concludes our commercial break. Thank you so much for staying tuned in.
That was a great segue. And you're talking about all of the possibilities of the things that you can do with your live rig. What's after all of these years, is there one thing that you can't live without? If you were going out to play a show, is there one thing that go on stage without?
I'm type A personality and kind of like a little funny. So I would go with like wrist guards. Like I kind of wear like a wristband
nice.
so I don't chew up my hands.
Yeah.
The right size picks. Like, could I make it work with another size pick? Yes, but very, very particular. Earplugs are a must at this point. Like I don't want to kill myself. Gear wise, I could probably make anything work, but I would feel a bit like a dip if it didn't sound right. So I want to really present it the right way. Right. But I could make almost anything work. But I could probably just. I'm gonna go with. I'm an entertainer, and it's Candy. It's Candyman that got me here, and I'll be doing Candyman all night long. So I just make it work. You know, what I mean, that's part of the art. Part of the art of it is adaptability and being able to troubleshoot and see around corners and stuff like that. I have recently decided that the reason why I'm mildly flexible is because I grew up surfing. And surfing, the terrain is always changing, and you have to make split decisions. Boom, 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 real quick, like how you're going to approach. Bent, sit, bit, turn, bent. And I think that in a way, when you're putting on a show, Saturday night at 8:00, that show is going to happen. All the problems leading up to it, hopefully you're able to navigate around them. So I don't know. I wouldn't cry too much. I'd love to be on the left. I like to be stage left. Could I be on stage right? Sure. Of course. You know, I like a straight mic stand as opposed to a boom stand. And that shit throws you off, man. I'm telling you, like, you know, you got, it's almost, I'm going back to the shoe analogy. It's like, you can do it with tight shoes, but you'll be thinking about it the whole time. You know?
Tight shoes.
I don't know, dude. What would you do? Tight shoes. I don't know. That would throw me off. I'm hyper focused. You know, the other thing is, I don't like playing in venues where they have like TV screens that you can see from the stage. Freaking hate it, dude.
Because I don't know if you had this experience, but since COVID and like being off for like 2 years or better part of, like playing live now, I feel like I'm even more susceptible to getting distracted. Like I don't know if that's if it's just me or I'm curious minds want to know. Like have you noticed anything different like since coming back? Like any new challenges that
I think I've always been easily distractible, and I think that part of it has to do with our connection to iPhones and the internet and how fast things blip by, and you could easily just like, oh, there's the shiny object, and you could get distracted. So I'm going to go with, I don't think it's you. I think it's a combination of how your brain's working and also like your attention span. Like that's the whole point of flashing lights is like, look over here. And that's kind of like you fall into the trap of that. But I haven't noticed for me, have I been more easily distracted? No, it's probably about the same. But I also know, like, if I'm going into a situation where there's screens, I'll do my best to not look, you know, like not look at that. Or it'll just, or else I become transfixed. You go, oh, wow, the Lakers are winning.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So, you know, that's me. I try not to do it.
Right.
And most venues aren't like cool enough to where they would turn it off. They just leave it on, blaring in the background, you know. So whatever. Yeah. That's my thing.
Well, I think we just got what you have coming up. Is there anything else that anything else that we missed in the commercial break?
So let's see on the commercial break. Well, so I know everybody wants to know, well, how do you get a hold of Doug Carrion? And this is how you do it. You go at Field Day Sounds at Field Day Sounds on any of the platforms.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. We're like the most user-friendly band in the world. So come and hang out and see us. And that's where you can find the dates and all that junk. Right now, we have a 7-inch that came out in February called Y, which is a 4-song 7-inch that came out on Unity Worldwide, which we're playing songs from that as we play live. And then we have another reissue coming out, hopefully in the last part of 2022, called Acquisition, which is all the songs we've recorded up to this point, plus 2 new songs on one piece of wax, which is pretty cool. It's coming out on Dr. Strange here in the States, and it's coming out on Little Rocket in the UK, which is Graham from Leatherface has a label over there. So that's what's coming in the queue. And then in the immediate, we're probably about halfway through writing for a new record that we want to record in 2022. And then release in 2023. But all of that is like COVID pending, vinyl factories working, and all that stuff.
It's vinyl factory stuff is a nightmare right now. Like, Brad have a record that's stuck in the queue. Like, we're getting ready to record a new record, so we'll see.
Yeah, and so that's a bit of the challenge. But we're really, for the most part, we're doing dates on the West Coast, and we're going to come back a couple times between now and the end of the year. We are going to make a run, like I had said before, up toward that Chicago, Green Bay area. We're going to do a run up toward San Francisco and the Bay Area and hit some of those places that we're about due to. So that's kind of where we are. That's kind of it. But
that's cool.
But I'd love to see anybody that wants to come out and see a show, come do it. Don't ever be shy, like come and say hello and stuff like that. Usually when we do shows, the band hangs out for about an hour afterwards. So if you want to say hi and all that, like, don't be a wanker. Come say hi. And you'll see me like, dude, you drink a lot of water. And you go, yep, I do.
Yeah.
So
wankers don't say hi.
Yeah, no. I'm pre-Nirvana. So what I mean by that is there's not a huge gap between me and the fans.
I totally.
So it's just like, you go, hold on a second, I got to go play. And you just get up there, and then you're like, I'm back, baby.
The way it should be.
Did I miss anything? Is there any vegan food in this place? So it's kind of like, I still love what I do. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to have a chat. It's great catching up and talking gear and stuff like that.
Yeah, thanks for being here. It's really interesting just to get your perspective. Is awesome.
For sure. And anytime you want to come out to a show, don't be shy. Hit me behind the scenes, and we'll try to make it happen. Yeah, what about you guys? Are you going to any cool shows over the next little bit?
I got nothing.
Yeah, I don't know. Like,
I'm working on like 2 records. Doing the Godfather record, and then another band that I've been part of 20 years from Boston, so like a hardcore band. So
it's a lot of writing. Yeah.
Where do you like? What part of are you guys both in California, or where are you guys?
Yeah, we're actually on the same compound.
I live in this back house in Los Angeles.
Okay, wow. So we're all kind of neighbors in a way. That's cool. I'm going to go see Def Club tonight, which is pretty exciting, and then this weekend I'm off to see Voodoo Glow Skulls and Strung Out at Shred Fest.
Oh, nice.
Where's that?
You know that place called the Pink Motel, which is like over on San Fernando Road, where they do have like it's a motel, and they shoot a bazillion movies there. So it's a daytime thing. It's all ages. But I'm looking forward to seeing Strung Out. So and Voodoo Glow Skulls too. Like
Ephraim's great.
Mofo the best, just the best. Remember before where I was talking about entertaining? That he's a rocking entertainer. Like love it. I could watch. He has the same way I could watch 1985 or 84 Jello Biafra, 83 Jello Biafra is this or HR, it's the same thing where I could watch Ephraim all day. Like he's just
Ephraim's great.
Freaking phenomenal frontman. Love it. So going out to support, I love music, and I still support my friends and go out and see shows.
That's
and
awesome.
shit like that. And I hope you out there in podcast land do the same too. Go out and support live bands. Go out and support local bands. They need your help. Yeah. And beyond that,
Sure.
That's all I got.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we'll see you at either a field day,
show, yeah,
other show.
In the sewers. I'll see you in the sewers.
Dude. I'm bringing the tire. We'll light it on fire.
Dude, we're gonna get the the trash can with the flamethrower and everything. But you got to wear the nun outfit. I want to see you wearing like the weird stilt nun outfit. I don't know. All right, guys, I'm out of here. Thanks a million. Ciao. Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.